In 1930s Mexico, a visibly abnormal skull was found in a mining tunnel by a girl in the Copper Canyons area. After decades of being kept in storage, the skull would eventually get into the hands of individuals that decided a scientific examination should be carried out. This was the beginning of what would turn out to be an examination that would continue for the next decade, one which still hasn't seen its final chapter. The man who decided to head the years-long crusade to find out why the skull looked the way it did was a human origins expert named MacLeod. This researcher began taking the skull to as many professionals from the mainstream science community as he could, but he would soon have to also undertake the very daunting tasking of trying to get these professionals to even give their time or opinion once the skull gained a reputation as being the skull of an alleged alien being. Nonetheless, the research that the late Lloyd Pye gathered in his lifetime, by way of tangible evidence and laboratory testings, will perhaps be someday recognized as some of the most important research to have ever been done. The facts gathered from the work he did and had done over the years, along with the theories that they give rise to, is what is going to be outlined, but it first must be noted that absolutely no known scientific causes to date, including cradle boarding and hydrocephaly, which have been ruled out by a study from Dr. Ted Robinson, has been given in order to explain all of the extremely abnormal traits that the skull bears. Starting with the brain cavity of the skull, after simple volume tests it became undoubtedly clear that the Starchild has a 30% increased brain size from what it should be. Average adult human skulls have a cranial volume of roughly 1400 cubic centimeters. The size of the Starchild skull as a whole is less than that of an adult human and is compared to the size of someone in their teenage years, yet in spite of this, the Starchild has a cranial volume that's in fact larger than an adult human counterpart, as it's measured at 1600 cubic centimeters. Because any internal pressure caused by a medical condition is ruled out, the skull's cranial volume proves accurate. The thickness of the Starchild's skull bone is far thinner than normal, being about 1/3 of what it normally should be while weighing roughly 1/3 that of a normal human skull of its same size. However, despite being much thinner and lighter, the skull is much harder and far more dense than normal skull bone. This is not only physically visible but is also shown in the skull bone's unprecedented spikes in levels of carbon, oxygen and aluminum in its chemical composition. A rare condition called progeria has been reasoned as an attempt to explain the thinness of the Starchild's bone, however this causes the bone to be not only thin but extremely weak as well. This is also accompanied by the premature fusion of the skull's cranial sutures, aspects which are not found in the Starchild as shown by its CAT scans and visible traits. The eyes, as well as the eye sockets of the skull, also show themselves to be very different from what is normally found in humans. The skull's eye sockets are almost half as deep as they should be, and this has been attempted to be explained with medical conditions such as Cruzon syndrome where the shallowing of eye sockets can occur. However, this is also accompanied by the premature fusion of the skull's cranial sutures. In physical recreations of what the Starchild would look like, normal eyes weren't even able to fit in its sockets and were forced to bulge out of its head, something which is an obvious hazard. What's more is that the skull's optic foramens, the small openings in each eye socket where blood vessels and optic nerves enter, are shaped much differently and are in completely different positions from where they would normally be. These factors show that the eyes that belonged to the Starchild's skull could not have looked nor functioned the way human eyes normally do. CT scans of the skull revealed that the Starchild has inner ears that are nearly 30% larger than normal. This, along with it having such a light and thin skull bone, shows the Starchild had much greater hearing, as lighter bone allows higher frequencies to be heard, even if sounds that wouldn't be normally, but also has led to the speculation that this could have allowed the sense of change in certain vibration. Larger inner ears can also lead to the assumption of far greater balance capabilities. The Starchild has a complete and utter lack of frontal sinuses. This can occur in the rare condition called progeria, But as already stated, the Starchild did not have this condition. This lack of sinuses, combined with its very shallow eye sockets, are the apparent reasons that its much larger brain is able to fit into its skull. Sinuses could affect, or is of use for voice resonance. In this light of working vocal resonance and speaking capabilities, it's unknown what it would mean in the case of the Starchild's complete lack of one coupled with its other features. This has led some to the speculation of nonverbal communication via telepathy. Other traits of the Starchild that is pointed to give credit to the theory of its means of communication is the size of the skull's neck, because the muscles belonging to the neck and the hole at the bottom of the skull shows the Starchild had a neck that was nearly half as big as normal, thus bringing the existence of the skull's voice box into question. The Starchild's external occipital protuberance, or anion, is not only not in the position it normally should be, but it's barely visible upon a first look at the skull. The anion is the bump on the back of one's head where neck muscles attach to the skull. On the Starchild, the anion is nearly half as big and is placed in a different position altogether, far lower down on the skull. This being smaller than normal is another aspect that shows the Starchild's neck and neck muscles were drastically smaller. Furthermore, this proves to be a logical genetic response to the build of the skull, its weight and the amount of strength it needed to function, as the entire balance point of the skull is located in a completely different position as well. This is seemingly due to the excess of space in the front of the skull by way of its lack of sinuses, shallow eye sockets and smaller lower face. When examining the skull with a scanning electron microscope at the Royal Holloway University in London, unknown microscopic fibers were found to be embedded within the bone itself. These are not yet known, and mycologists who've examined them have stated that they don't resemble any known fungus or bacteria. The fibers appear to be a part of the bone and its growth, or even possibly put into it. When cutting into the skull with a bone saw, the unclean cut of the fibers shows their high resistance and durability. An early X-ray of a piece of the skull's upper maxilla with 2 teeth showed there was 5 still embedded tooth crowns within the bone. Being that more teeth were yet to come down, along with the small size of the maxillar fragment that held the crowns, researchers were led to the initial belief that the skull was in fact that of a child's. However, this is now believed not to be true. Among other aspects, even though the maxillar fragment is child-sized and had crowns, its 2 teeth that were already out and attached showed that they had the wear equivalent to that of an adult with many years of use. It's unknown how its teeth could show to be of at the very least a mid-aged to young adult, but have such a small maxilla and several more teeth yet to come down. This has caused some to theorize that not only was the Starchild not a child, but that its large amount of teeth yet to come down could indicate that it would have lived a much longer life than what is usually expected. Based on the expansion of what remains of the skull's zygomatic arches, it would show that the lower face of the Starchild was greatly reduced to around half that of a normal same-sized counterpart, with its cheekbones close on the face and much smaller than normal. Medical conditions that were formerly used to explain this include Crouzon syndrome, something which causes underdevelopment of the face. However, as already stated, this condition didn't occur in the Starchild as its cranial sutures were not fused prematurely. Lastly, after all of the Starchild's skull factors that simply cannot be scientifically explained, much less by the actions of any deformation, perhaps the most important part of the skull is its genetic makeup. A full recovery of the skull's DNA has yet to be completed. However, the difference in the skull's mitochondrial and nuclear DNA base pairs that have been sequenced so far, when fully projected to reasonable estimates, show there is likely going to be a far greater difference in DNA percentage than that of a human to chimpanzee DNA percent difference. Hopefully, time will tell the story of this true anomaly.